For a country of 10 million people, Portugal has an unfair share of elite-level rally history. From Ruben Faria to the late great Paulo Goncalves, it punches high above its size. But it only takes one trip here to really understand. The population doesn't live here, the dirt roads and the cork trees do. Away from the coast, the place is quiet and it is full of endless dirt tracks. It makes sense then that they also produce the most dedicated adventure bike on the planet. Over time, progression is only natural, but there's no doubt at this point, there is no tangible relationship between Dakar bikes and production bikes. We don't have 75 horsepower 450s running around South America and Africa, and quite frankly, we don't need them. They're great, but precision tools are exactly that. Dakar bikes are not comfy, they are not friendly. They are very fast and very good at going very fast through the desert safely. They're stiff, they're big, and the seats are always way too hard. Everything else is by the by. If we take a look at Lyndon's Basel bike as an example, he used a Dakar bike from a bygone era. The KTMs crossed from 690 to 450, and the chassis was the same. And then he spent a ton of time, knowledge, and skill to sculpt the edges of that bike down to make it work as a travel bike. A new precision tool for a new job. You could buy one too, and they were upwards of £25,000 for a custom build. There is an idea here that perpetual growth and progress is the ideal, but I think sometimes we hit a sweet spot as a society and then we float right on by. Maybe it's nostalgia talking, but I think most people can find something in their life where that has happened. Sometimes there is progression in the regression. The AJP PR7 is a regression in the best possible way. This is a bike that is not new. It's more than 6 years since the original PR7, and the engine is a reworking through SWM via the old Husqvarna factory of the late great Husqvarna 630 motor that launched in 2010. That's 14 years. The gold edition that I'm riding gets its name from the iconic hue of the Öhlins suspension front and rear. This is suspension that has been present in the market for more than a decade now. My dad's 2013 Dakar bike was shod with it too. There is nothing progressive or exciting about that on paper, and yet here is a dedicated adventure bike that weighs 165 kgs wet, has 300 millimeters of premium suspension, an air intake so high that if you drown the bike, you're probably drowning yourself, and it makes an easy, unstressed 60 horsepower. All the switchgear, the grips, and all of the bits you touch are from the same era. Domino dominates, just as they did in the early 2010s on every dirt bike. Instead of a fancy TFT screen, we have a Samsung A7 light tablet in a rubber case with the DMD2 app navigation system and hella headlights that are straight out of the mid-noughties rally scene. But a little digging starts to paint a picture that is a little more than old things cobbled together. As I rolled out for my first few kilometers of Portuguese trails, it hit me. I knew this bike. In fact, I know this bike. I have never ridden a PR7 in my life, and here I was back in familiar territory.
There is a very familiar feel to this bike.
Back before I rode Dakar, before rally bikes became precision instruments, I rode a fair few of my dad's bikes. Over the 10 Dakars he started, the bike started dreadful and nearly unrideable. The F650 GS was a shocker. He followed that era with a BMW X Challenge, and that was a pretty big step forwards. It was lighter, it was more purposeful, and it was no longer unrideably bad. And then the 450 era came. The previously mentioned Husky 449 with Öhlins arrived, and as I rode out into the hills of Portugal, that is what I was riding again. A rally bike sat square in 2010. Once you know a feeling, it is unforgettable. I've not had that experience in 14 years, and here it was again. The more I rode, the faster I rode, the more unmistakable it became. It's kind of striking that this was the sweet spot between travel and racing, where the bikes kind of did both. Lyndon's Basel was the same era of Dakar bike, and the PR7 Gold rides just like that feeling, with the edges just ever so slightly knocked off. The seat is a little plusher and comfier for a long day on the bike. The engine is like a lot of early EFI dirt bike motors. It's got that long stroke feeling with a ton of torque. It's a little lumpy and slightly abrupt on throttle roll-on, but from then on it's smooth and enjoyable. The gearing feels about right, the flywheel weight of the engine has great balance. It'll crawl up steep hills in first gear without ever feeling like it's going to flame out or stall, and it'll rip along the quicker trails with more than enough pop, brap and power to be enjoyable, safe and very quick.
The suspension might be a decade old, but my golly gosh is it nice. I suppose nice is not really the word. Luxurious is the word. It is soft and compliant and very comfortable on the trail, but it also has some very nice bottoming resistance. It's doing all of the things you want it to do well. It's a tiny bit undersprung, but it gets away with it.
To me, that underspringing does create some problems if you're adding luggage or a heavier rider. The basic riding position will be a bit more backseat, but the Öhlins otherwise does a superb job of the two basic things I think most adventure riders want. It tracks the ground delightfully well, not skipping off those loose rocks or bumps, and when you hit something harder, it has some bottoming resistance. For the type of bike, it could do with holding up in the stroke a bit more, but hey, it's a pretty easy fix.
And did I mention it wheelies outrageously well? Because it does. Having your fuel at the rear seems to do that for bikes, and the PR7 it's up there with the best.
Now, before I talk any more about wheelies, I really want to talk about this shot. If you've been around Brake Magazine a while, you may have noticed a jump in the quality of the helmet cam footage, and that is down to the incredible Insta360 Ace Pro, the camera that now lives on my helmet and is the sponsor of this video.
It has been a game changer. Now, this could be a boring ad read about the 4K image sensor, the Leica lens, and all the specs to melt your brain, but that isn't the main reason that I love this little camera.
Now, it helps. It makes the world pop, and the big sensor and the AI mean that the image quality is ridiculous at night.
What makes it stand out for me is the ease of use and the options available to you. The experience of using this as a bike rider is a cut above cameras I've had before. I'm sure we've all been the person checking the red light in the mirror, asking our mate if we're recording, or just generally faffing about with the camera. Now, Insta360 have made this way easier.
Firstly, the recording light is huge. There is no chance you're missing it. Secondly, it vibrates when you start recording, and you can hear that in your helmet. There is voice control and gesture control, but my favorite option is the GPS preview remote, so I can control the camera from my handlebars. I can see the framing, the camera settings, the battery, and I can turn it on, turn it off, and control recording without any question marks with my gloves on. Mind-blowing. On top of that, the GPS remote adds in telemetry data that you can add afterwards using either the phone app or the desktop app. The magnetic mount is awesome for easy unmounting and mounting to change batteries. The zoom mode doesn't lose any quality, and it makes capturing the details of your adventure that much easier. But it's the Insta360 apps that make the whole thing work. The phone app is out of this world useful, especially for short clips to show people or for automating social media content. It's quick and easy and just a vastly better experience than anything else I've used in this category. Now, back to that AJP, Portuguese hills and those stunning trails. Now, let's get this clear. I do not wheelie particularly well. The bike does, however, and it let me do some that made me crap my pants and feel insanely cool at the same time. Any bike that makes you feel like the best version of yourself is doing something right. I mean, this all sounds pretty damn rosy. A Dakar style and feeling bike that's capable of taking you around the world, both slowly or fast, comfortably and reliably. There has to be a catch. There are no free dinners and other such sayings.
There is. The PR7 will catch you off guard. It's going to do it once, twice, maybe 100 times, because for all that rally style bikes are great, they are also always a compromise. They are designed to go forwards really well. Long travel suspension, high air intake, lots of fuel, all make for a decent seat height. At 920 millimeters, it's smaller than my dirt bike, but there is a problem. The steering lock. Every single rally bike I have ever seen has a shocking steering lock. It is a consistent problem. When you have fairings and big forks and big frames, it will make that a problem. And it makes turning around in slow and tight places very awkward. Caught me off guard probably 20 to 25 times in the last few days. If it wasn't for the fact that I'm bigger than the average bear, I would have crashed every single time.
And that is the ceiling here, the junction where you decide to get on or off. The PR7 is a very rideable bike. Its engine is an absolute delight to ride and can manage crawling and ripping with great balance, and that makes it friendly to most abilities. It's light, the suspension is forgiving and expansive, and it is very comfortable to ride for a long time. The riding position when standing is as good as any bike I've ever ridden, and yet if you fall over every time you go to turn around, that's going to ruin your confidence. You need to decide whether you can learn to deal with that or already have the skills to deal with that.
And for someone of my size, I would definitely recommend a taller seat. Again, it's going to make it a little comfier to ride long days on, but it's also going to make it easier to ride sat down. If you ever see Lyndon's bike in real life, I think it's closer to a penny farthing than a motorbike. Now I'm going to interrupt the flow of this video again a little bit. This time not for an advert, but to talk about the tablet. Come have a look. I saw a few comments of people eschewing the tablet as being old or not for them. As a public service announcement, please don't do that. It is so good to use. It has some limitations. It takes a long time to turn on, but once it's on, it has been seamless.
The mapping system, the UI, the experience of a screen and navigation setup that bloody big, bright and easy to read is truly a joy. It epitomizes what makes the PR7 good. It is a unique solution, a dedicated and bold solution, and it requires no work or modification from you to get going. Now, the crux here is that there is no real production competition to the PR7. You can build a similar bike from a KTM 690 Enduro, spending more money to build an equivalent spec that I'm not sure handles as well as this Gold Edition does, without also spending good money on the bike's suspension.
This is not a bike built by a premium mainstream brand with €1 billion in sales, the resources of venture capital or shareholders. This is a bike built by very enthusiastic, passionate people, and it rides like that. It's better for it. It's what made KTM so great in the early years. It has a couple of quirks. The initial throttle opening is jerky in a similar way to a Tenere 700. And just like a T7, it is fine. The fuel cap design seems to want to put a puff of dust into the fuel each time you pull it out, and that probably warrants the mod that you can find online. And the grips are, well, they're awful. They were awful in 2010 and they are still awful now. Everything else is ready to adventure. The seat, the suspension, the handlebars, the fuel range, the navigation, and the whole ride experience.
Every decision was made without compromise and with the end goal in mind. While it's not cheap, especially for a bike that on paper is a regression, it is without doubt a precision tool for inserting yourself into faraway places, doing wheelies better than normal, and doing so with a huge smile on your face, as long as you don't fall over doing the U-turn.